Howdy. Welcome to my office, which is currently in the corner of the basement as we're renovating. So, fun times. I want to talk to you about wood mulch. I'm constantly asked how to install it. So there are some key things I will tell you in the next few seconds. Number one, no landscape fabric under wood mulch. No. Wood mulch biodegrades over time. So in essence, if you put landscape fabric underneath it, you are growing soil on top of your landscape fabric. Thus, your plants become, first of all, stressed as their roots recognize there's soil up there and the roots try to go upwards. Weed seed can get down into that soil, and moisture is held in that soil above the fabric when the roots are below. So, landscape fabric under rock mulch, no landscape fabric under wood mulch. Now, if you do want to put a temporary weed barrier under your wood mulch because you're concerned about weeds coming in that are pre-existing in the soil beforehand, this is when we talk about sheet mulching, when you're actually laying thick layers of newspaper, or in my preference, clean brown cardboard paper, like a craft paper. You can get it at Michael's, or you can save some money and get it at Shipper's Supply. Big rolls of it if you have a large area. So if you do want to put something down as a weed control mechanism for any pre-existing vegetation or weeds in that soil before putting on your wood mulch, you use sheet mulching. I have sheet mulched entire grass areas, and it is the best for new plants. The growth is phenomenal. You're basically creating compost. Okay, wood mulch. When you're choosing your wood mulch, you can look at cedar, which has a longer lifespan than your evergreen and deciduous, other evergreen and deciduous blends. An amazing smell. Quite costly here in Alberta, but cedar is beautiful. It smells great, but I wouldn't use that near your vegetables or anywhere you're growing vegetables, or even you might want to have some considerations around your fruit trees. And the reason I say this is cedar is has natural anti-aging properties. It's antifungal. It's it has natural insecticidal properties. So it naturally, antifungal. So you can still get some fungi in your cedar wood mulch, but not a heck of a lot of it. Because this is why cedar takes so long to break down, because fungi and moisture and insects do not attack it as much as other wood mulches. But with that means then all the beneficial flora in your soil and beneficial insecti in your soil will not be at the soil surface under cedar. So for your vegetable gardens, where we want a very rich fungal community, we want a rich, and I mean fungal as in like mycorrhizae that are beneficial for our food products, our food plants. So cedar is not recommended around your veggies or really around your fruit trees, because we really want to have a very diverse soil ecosystem around our food producing plants. That being said, I have cedar everywhere save for around the beds with my fruit trees, berries. Yeah. So, I digress. Wood mulch, you can get shredded wood mulch, which is fantastic. It's literally the chunks are as they're cut, they shred. The ends shred and act like little grips. So the shredded wood mulch can handle slopes, it can handle wind, it can handle foot traffic, it can handle water movement. So all of those erosion factors are not impacting shredded wood mulch like it would other mulches or even bare soil. So a standard specification for parks Wood mulch is a shredded self-binding wood mulch because they don't need to worry about this wood mulch migrating down slopes and onto grass, and the kids are running through the parks, aren't kicking it up everywhere because that shredded holds onto itself. So if you have an area that has a greater slope to it, greater wind, then I would highly recommend shredded. Chip is great too. I always find that you need to pick it by your aesthetic preference. I love more of the evergreen chip myself. I find it has a richer color. When it rains, it smells so good versus, say, a deciduous chip like a poplar. You can get poplar chip and it is cheap. You can get such a good deal from it. You often get it free from arborists, from your municipality. But I just don't enjoy the aesthetic as much myself because I like the rich wood color, the richer, deeper, warmer colors, and the smell is so good, especially cedar. So good. And then you go up to the bark chip, and bark chip is so beautiful. It's so naturalized. It's big chunks. There's really rich colors in it, really dark, deep colors in it. But you cannot use that where it's the opposite of shredded, both not just physically, but in its impact. It's not going to self-bind. It's not going to do well on slopes. It's so light. It will blow in strong winds. So you have strong prevailing winds, which are predominantly northwest here in central Alberta. Then you want to steer away from the wood chip. The bark chunks. And especially if you have a very young property, because then there isn't the trees there to buffer the wind or any large shrubs yet to hold the bark mulch in and buffer that wind. If you have a more mature property or more established trees and shrubs, the bark mulch won't migrate as much. Again, you don't want it where there's a lot of foot traffic, a lot of wind, much of a slope, a lot of water movement. That's something to consider. Colored. Well, I used to not like colored wood chips, like a stained wood chip or dyed wood chips. They're not stained, they're dyed. Because at the time they used to fade. I believe there's better products out there now. What our landscape centers have now are a much better product. If you do see though that if you go there and you see that there is like a color stain around the area of your mulch, your colored mulch, maybe you want to think twice about that mulch. I haven't seen that in years though. So shredded, chip to bark mulch. Consider the slope and exposures. Consider that kind of wind impact and the aesthetic you're trying to achieve. If you are a person that loves scents like I do, I highly recommend the evergreen varieties, especially cedar. And though our municipalities have done an awesome job at being able to take these yard wastes and turn them into a wood chip that we can use, the one thing to consider, and they'll say themselves, they can't always control what residents bring in to the facility. And so if it has fire blight or black knock or poplar borer or spruce bud or any disease or insect infestation, it's going into that wood mulch. So that's something to consider if you are planting. And my thought is, especially if you're planting fruit trees, you just do not want that potential risk of fire blight to your apple, or So, and then of course, then there's your rock mulches. Now I'll just talk briefly about rock mulch. It can be expensive. It's heavy. It is not low maintenance. You want rock mulch? Know that you're going to have to clean that rock mulch. You're not going to need to top dress it every few years as you would with the wood mulch because of that biodegrading and reduction in depth. You will install it at 4 inches. Yes, people, 4 inches. It's pricey, but if you want an effective weed barrier and some moisture control, you're going to want to have a 4-inch depth. if you want to save some cost because you want a larger boulder, or even whether it's a 3-inch rock mulch to a larger boulder, if you want to save some cost, keep those bottom 2 inches as a smaller rock. When you have a smaller rock, you have smaller voids between that rock. So if you have big boulders, there's going to be big voids between the boulders. The smaller the boulder, the smaller the voids between. You can power wash, so power hose your rock mulch in the spring. You can leaf blow and power hose again in the fall. And what you're trying to do is get those particulates that have fallen between the rocks into the voids that are going to biodegrade and turn into soil where weeds can then grow. You want to wash those particulates out before weeds can establish in that. So if you want to save some cost, put a pea gravel or a very small wash rock as your first 2 inches, and then you can top your next 2 inches or more with a larger boulder. And again, you want fabric under that rock because it's not going to make that nice thick mat like your wood will. And there's rubber mulch. Now, I rarely ever use rubber mulch. I think the only time I ever really did was corporate. I had one client once ask for a rubber mulch. They wanted it in a playground area for their family. And that's great. I would say if you're going to go with rubber mulch, go to the landscape centers, check it out yourself, find a color you like. And if there is a strong smell of rubber, don't buy it. If it's off-gassing, you don't want that on your property. Okay, there's a quick 101 on some mulch. Now's the time of year you would be putting it in. And you can use a landscape fabric under rubber mulch because the rubber mulch is not going to biodegrade like the wood mulch does. So wood mulch, rock mulch, rubber mulch. These are all non-plant growth ground covers. We don't want bare soil, people. In nature, you don't see bare soil. Bare soil becomes dirt. It's void of life, and it just says, hey, weeds, come establish here. So cover that soil up. If you're not getting it covered with a plant ground cover, like delicious thyme, then please use a wood, rock, or rubber. And my preference is for wood. And yeah, happy fall landscaping.